In this video, I'd like to introduce you to a second, smarter viewer that is powered by our Virtual Fellow. You can access it by clicking here in the second icon in the ribbon. Virtual Fellow uses deep learning to automatically identify the relevant images and display them in a standard format, regardless of the order in which they are acquired. Here you can see the images are already windowed and leveled, zoomed, and rotated. The short axis images are displayed from base to apex, and the long axis images are displayed first the 2-chamber view, then the 3-chamber view, then the 4-chamber view. Virtual Fellow works best if all images are present before processing occurs. However, if additional images are sent over because a study is in progress, you can update the Virtual Fellow by clicking on the refresh button here. If for whatever reason a different series needs to be displayed, you can select that series by clicking on the number 1 button here and choosing from the list of series and selecting it. As a reminder, I'm going to shut off the annotations by pressing Ctrl-T. I do this because it's easier for me to assess the wall motion without the regions of interest being visualized. If you look at the long axis views, you can see this 2-chamber view is highlighted in red, and there's a yellow corner on the left side. That indicates that there are additional 2-chamber images present. And if I press the Z key, you can see the other image that is also present. You can see this is also the case for the 3-chamber view. If I press the Z key, you can see this is a 3-chamber view acquired with a different sequence. So all the 3-chamber views are displayed in this particular window. And again, the same is true for the 4-chamber view. If I press the Z key, you can see other 4-chamber views present. So the user knows where to find these particular images because they're always located in the same position. In addition to qualitatively assessing these images, one can view the quantitative analysis by clicking on these results button. Here is the results for function. You can see the results for the left ventricle as well as the right ventricle, and you can see the time volume curves from the traces. Any abnormal values will be highlighted in pink. You can also see the flow measures here. And you can also see the results from the late gadolinium enhancement analyses. Now to look at some of these other acquisitions, one can choose from the list of icons here on the right side. Right now we're looking at function. If I go to the 3rd icon down, this is the icon for late gadolinium enhancement. And you can see again the images are displayed from base to apex. And you can see the 2-chamber view. There was no 3 or 4-chamber view acquired. If I want to look at the perfusion images, I can click over here and display the perfusion images. If I select a perfusion image, if I turn on the annotation, you can see the purple line shows on the long axis images where the selected slice is. Virtual Fellow is great for comparisons. For instance, I can seamlessly compare function to viability by choosing this icon here. And you'll notice that the Virtual Fellow has automatically matched up the corresponding images. Here you can see the Virtual Fellow matched up the images not by the order in which they were acquired, but rather by which images correspond to each other. Again, I'm going to toggle off the annotation, and I can pause the images here, and you can see in this comparison, Virtual Fellow will display all of the functional images, and it will select those late gadolinium images, and it will display them below their corresponding functional image. So you can see that this functional image was matched up to this late gadolinium image, and so forth and so on. If for whatever reason you disagree with a matchup, you can adjust it by using the arrow keys, by just selecting a pair of images and using the arrow keys, you can slide the images back and forth. You can also display the images one at a time and use the page down key to compare for instance, function and viability images. You'll also see that the long axis images are also displayed side by side. In this case, the two-chamber views for function and viability were displayed side by side. There was no three-chamber or four-chamber viability image acquired in this study. Similarly, you can compare perfusion to viability by clicking on this icon here. Again, the computer will match for each perfusion image a single viability image that most closely corresponds to the perfusion image. In addition, if there were stress and rest perfusion images present in this acquisition, one could click on this icon here. Now, one other wonderful feature of Virtual Fellow is it will actually allow you to automatically compare current studies with prior studies. This particular patient had a prior study. Without even asking for the comparison, Virtual Fellow has loaded the images automatically. So if I click on this icon here, it will compare the new function to the old function. Let me switch viewports so you have a lot of viewports, and now you can see the top row is number 1. That corresponds to the current study. The second row is labeled number 2. That corresponds to the prior study. And this next row, number 3, again, the current study. This row, again, the number 2 indicates the prior study. For the long axis images, the first column is labeled with number 1. That's the current study. And the second column here is labeled with number 2. That would be, again, the prior study. And again, if you do not like a particular image, you can see I can press the Z key after highlighting it, and it will give me a different two-chamber view that was acquired that has less of an artifact at that LV apex. And you can do this not just to compare the functional images, but you can do this for the viability images as well, which you can see here. Again, the current study would be on top, and the prior study would be on the next row. Or I could switch this to a smaller viewport, and then we could just have the current study at the top and the prior study below. And you could do that as well for perfusion images and compare the perfusion image from the current study to the perfusion image from the prior study. So I hope you can see how Virtual Fellow can save you a tremendous amount of time by presenting the images in a standardized format and allowing comparisons to be made much more quickly, either between series of a given exam or even between different exams. Thank you very much.